in 248. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, Monique, one of the things that we may have been able to sort of read the tea leaves to determine that was confirmed today, apparently by the wife of Stephen Miller, is that Don Lemon and as well as the other journalist, Georgia, who was arrested after apparently these things went to a grand jury. They were presented in front of a grand jury, and the reason that's significant is because the federal government ran out of options effectively when they went to a magistrate judge and they could not secure an arrest warrant, and then they appealed that, and they could not have that appeal granted, and so their attempts to go through a magistrate judge in order to secure an arrest warrant were both denied, which left them with very few options, which was to go in front of the grand jury. I had sort of thought about this as a former prosecutor because their options were limited. The thing about going in front of a grand jury that our audience needs to understand is, the old saying is very much so true, that you can indict a ham sandwich. It is not difficult to get an indictment when you have a presentation in front of the grand jury. Speaking as a former prosecutor, and one of the reasons why, for people who don't know that, is it's a secret proceeding. It is a proceeding that is effectively run by the prosecutor. There is no magistrate there. There is no judge there. There is no arbiter. It is basically the prosecutor presents whatever facts they choose to present. The defendant has a right in most cases to testify, but in most cases will not testify. The defense attorney cannot ask any questions or be present if their client is not testifying. And so no one actually knows what was said, who presented, what witnesses they presented, what evidence the grand jury saw. And so all of those things create a very comfortable environment for prosecutors to secure an indictment. I want to read two of the statutes that apparently came back on the indictment. One of them is U.S. Code 18 U.S. Code 241. If anyone's looking this up, Section 241 of 18 U.S. Code. It is referred to as a conspiracy against rights, which makes it a federal crime for two or more persons to conspire to injure, threaten, or to intimidate anyone in the United States in the free exercise or enjoyment of any constitutional or statutory right. Violations can result in fines up to 10 years in prison or up to life imprisonment or death if certain serious crimes result. The other statute that appears that Don was charged under is 18 U.S.C. Section 248, which is known as the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or the FACE Act of 1994. This is a federal law that prohibits the use of force, threat of force, or physical obstruction to intentionally injure, intimidate, or interfere with anyone obtaining or providing reproductive health services or exercising First Amendment rights at a place of worship. So that last statute was intended to protect people who are seeking reproductive care or to exercise their right, what had previously been a right to abortion and abortion clinics primarily, and then the First Amendment piece around houses of worship had been added on, and the first piece was essentially about obstructing the ability for people to go and worship. Again, I want to stress to viewers that regardless of what the statutes say and regardless of what we may have seen in various videos, we do not know how the prosecutors in this case framed the facts in front of this particular grand jury that returned the indictment. What I will say before we go further, Monique, is that I think, however, it is telling. MS Now reporter Carol Leonnig earlier today confirmed that there were career DOJ prosecutors in both Minnesota, where this took place, as well as in Los Angeles, where Don was arrested.
I think we have that, if somebody can put it up.
Who refused to participate in the arrest and the indictment and the prosecution of this case because they felt like the evidence did not match the facts. And so that only affirms for me a previous notion that I've had, which is part of the punishment is the process. It is it is to sort of embarrass Don Lemon. It is to embarrass the journalists who are associated with Don Lemon in such a way that they are not willing to continue to go forward. And I think that that's a very significant thing. Georgia Fort as well, another journalist arrested as part of doing their job, exercising their right to freedom of the press. And so when you have career prosecutors who are saying that the evidence does not support the charges in 2 different cities, 2 different offices, that is extremely telling as to the strength of this case. But again, the strength of the case is not the conversation for the DOJ and for those who are pushing this. It is making the process and its difficulty the punishment for Don and for Georgia.
Right. And what they will learn is that they're just going to strengthen the resolve, not just of somebody like Don or Georgia, who have been doing this for years and are a credit to their profession, but they're strengthening the resolve of the public, because everyone who's seeing this is reacting, understanding that this is wrong, and that if there was ever some line to be crossed, then we've crossed it. But there are no lines with this administration. I want to highlight a couple of things that you said, Charles. Obviously, we say in the law all the time, the grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. The reason why we say that is because as a career defense attorney, one of the things I always knew is the grand jury belongs to the prosecutor. So unless they can't, and really, if they're trying to say Mickey Mouse was there, if they've got a sliver of anything to show it, they're going to get their indictment. And the reason is because the standard is lower. So sometimes the public is looking at it and they're thinking, well, there must be evidence, because in a criminal case, you have to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt in order to get a conviction. And that is true for conviction, but that is not true to get an indictment. And so whoever they found, because these career DOJ prosecutors wouldn't do the job, and we've seen prosecutors quit their jobs in DC, we've seen them quit their jobs in Minnesota, U.S. Attorneys, career members of that office have left their jobs. And so it's like many other things in this administration, Charles, where they have to go down the line until they get somebody who doesn't have any scruples, who doesn't have any integrity. Sometimes they have to go out and hire folks off the street. And that's how they get somebody to actually get this work done. To your knowledge, what will the next steps be?
So at the point that the indictment is read in open court, there will be an initial plea entered by Don. I fully expect that it will be not guilty. And at that point, the judge will make a decision as to any bail if the DOJ asks for bail. I can't imagine that Don would be remanded. I can't imagine that bail would be exorbitantly high. Don is not at all. And for people who
don't wait for a deal, Fort Wayne Kia is dropping tons of savings. We're stretching your dollar and snapping high interest rates in half. Our financing is flexible. Get massive gains on your trade-in. Fort Wayne Kia, no heavy lifting required.
Get behind the wheel of the all-new 2025 Telluride and 2026 Sorento with an incredible 0% APR for 48 months. Experience the 2026 Sportage with a low 0.9% APR.
And he's like one of the most recognizable faces in journalism, if not media, across the country. He's not at all a flight risk. So I can't see bail being set here. And if it is, I certainly can't see it being high. That being said, after that, he will be released and there will be scheduling around the next phases of the case, discovery, pretrial motions, and things of that nature. I anticipate that there may be a case that is being built here, and we've talked about this before, Monique, for alleging malicious prosecution by the defense. It would not entirely surprise me to see that his attorneys consider filing a motion for malicious prosecution, and here's why. This is where the MAGA machine, the MAGA media machine, comes back to bite itself, because it is very uncharacteristic to have government officials, particularly at the leadership level, so openly and so brazenly talk about their intentions and how they intend to move forward with respect to investigations and prosecutions. And they've done that writ large with respect to Don Lemon around this. And so they have created their own very, very discoverable paper trail that's been out in the open that they would literally have to stipulate to, that they, came from official accounts on social media. And so now you have given people the tools to build this case for malicious prosecution against them.
Well, and not only that, Charles, but the chief judge wrote that letter that ended up being part of the public record. Correct. Where this DOJ was pressuring him. Like they couldn't get what they wanted out of the magistrate. They demanded the chief judge do something about it, and we're saying, and today, we need you to do it today. And he had to go and explain how he has a child with special needs who he was caring for, and how there was no urgency, and how they expected him to respond to their appeal without even sending him the appeal. They didn't send him a courtesy copy of what was being appealed, but were demanding his response. And so that led to these 3 appellate court judges denying it, saying there was no urgent matter. But the other thing the chief judge said in his letter was, there's no accusation of violence here. There's no reason for all of this overreach. And that, along with what you're saying, is they're devoting all of these funds, all of this full power of the federal government on these journalists and these people who were protesting, but for our purposes for today, on journalists like Don and Georgia, who were covering an event, and there's no one saying anything different. And in Don's case, he sat there and interviewed the pastor who was conducting the services that day. So to me, if you stand there and let me interview you, that's not me trespassing.
Well, Monique, from a legal standpoint, I think that dovetails exactly into my next point. Eventually, the rubber is going to meet the road here when you're talking about having to provide evidence that sustains these charges. At some point, you are going to have to put forth witnesses that corroborate facts and a timeline that isn't supported by the video that we have all seen repeatedly. You're going to have to sort of counter that. And that is where I say that for the DOJ, the punishment is the process. Yeah. Because the amount of evidence that they have, whether you're putting testimonial evidence up against video evidence and going to ask a jury in a court to sort of discern what makes most sense. Are you going to believe the testimony of someone who alleges that they were there and says, something that you can't see on video? Or are you going to trust your own actual eyes as you look at angle after angle after angle that is explained by attorneys and through testimony of other witnesses who were there and corroborated by the video that actually exists? Yeah. They know that they cannot sustain this. And that is why career prosecutors are like, I don't want my name associated with this. But again, for people who are saying, but why would they do this? They would do it for the intimidation factor. They would do it for the embarrassment factor. They would do it because oftentimes the retraction is always quieter than the headline. That is to say, today, Don Lemon being arrested is breaking news. It is a celebration in Magaland. It is red meat for that base. But right at the point that the case is dismissed, at the point that the case moves on, that's not something that is as much of a conversation for them. So in their minds, from a narrative place, they maintain control. So for anyone who was wondering why would they go forward if they didn't have the charges, because it's not about the conviction, it's about the embarrassment.
Right. And Don isn't embarrassed, and neither is Georgia. And we stand with them, and it is going to backfire, not just when it's dismissed, but now, because they look ridiculous. They look like they don't care anything about the Constitution. They look like they don't respect journalists, which we know they don't. And to speak about these things, I am thankful we have joining us on the show, not for nearly the first time, but we have Aaron Haynes, who is president of the National Bar, not the National Bar Association, that's my association, National Association of Black Journalists. We have Reese Colbert, host of the Reese Colbert Show on Sirius XM Urban View. And I think we have Clay Kane also. Do we have Clay? Hi there, Clay. Host of the Clay Kane Show. And you know what? You guys have all been on Don's show any number of times, and we look to you to provide us the information, the commentating, and the analysis that we need. I want to start with you, though, Aaron, because on behalf of Black journalists, and I know that journalists from a lot of different other associations stood with you when you all first made a statement over a week ago. But what do you have to say to us today?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, we are standing with and supporting Don and also Georgia Ford, the journalists who were arrested this morning. But this is not about one journalist or one protest. This is really about whether the First Amendment is still going to protect journalism, right? Especially journalism that is challenging power and centering marginalized communities. NABJ is obviously deeply concerned and even outraged, frankly, by the arrests of Don Lemon and Georgia Ford. They weren't obstructing justice. We know this. They were practicing journalism. And arresting journalists for news gathering is a direct threat to press freedom. And that is the message that I need for folks to hear today. These actions are not unprecedented. We know that Black journalists have long been surveilled, right? Arrested, targeted for exposing injustice. And so what we're seeing now is an alarming continuation of that pattern and an escalation that demands a response.
It does demand a response. Just a follow-up, Aaron, what does that look like to you? I know that NABJ will be issuing a statement, and you're speaking on behalf of the organization now, but what is the call to action, either for the public or for those of us who are in front of cameras and have the opportunity to speak?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think first and foremost, we need transparency from authorities about the legal basis for these arrests, right? We need an end to prosecutorial actions targeting journalists for lawful news gathering. And we need an inquiry into whether these arrests violate press freedom statutes and constitutional guarantees. We also need for our larger press community to stand with us. They've been doing that. I expect that they will continue to do that. You've already seen statements in solidarity from other organizations this morning, from the civil rights community that has been standing up and speaking out. But again, this should alarm not just every single journalist in this country, but every member of the public. This is anti-democratic. We need you all to continue to monitor this situation, to speak out about this situation. This raises serious questions about abuse of power, disregard for First Amendment protections. And so that is what we need for people to keep in mind. Journalism that holds power to account is not a crime. And we continue to assert that the First Amendment is not optional.
Well, I want to hear from Clay, but it's my understanding that the leader, Hakeem Jeffries, is in a press conference right now addressing this issue. So let's go to that.
Audio.
I can't hear it. Can anybody hear it? Well, while they're working on that, Clay, let's go to you. What are your thoughts this morning? I think it's really appropriate. The book that you just released.
Yeah, no, it is. Burn Down Master's House. I am outraged. There's one thing that struck me. I'm not sure if you addressed it, Monique. It's been a crazy morning. But the fact that they're using a law out of the KKK Act of 1871 to arrest a Black journalist. I have been saying this. They have done their 19th century research. This was literally a law created to protect Black people. Okay, we have the audio.
And what do you think that says about the Trump administration?
Trump administration has systematically targeted the free and fair press because they want to intimidate America and oppose anyone who is not willing to bend the knee to their extremism. We are not going to be intimidated at all. The free and fair press is central to the foundation of American democracy. Thomas Jefferson famously made that clear, that he would prefer a country that had newspapers over government as opposed to governments over newspapers. This is central to who we are as a country. And so Don Lemon, we know, is an accomplished journalist who was doing his job as part of the free and fair press. There's no legitimacy, no basis to Don Lemon's arrest, no basis to the arrest of the other journalists. And the American people are not going to stand for it. And House Democrats are going to stand up for them. And the rights of the free and fair press as central to American democracy and our values in terms of who we are.
But how?
I issued a statement as it relates to where we are right now. It just happened. And so we haven't had an opportunity, even as members of Congress, to talk to each other about next steps. But of course, next steps will be forthcoming.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I'm sure you've been monitoring what's going on in the Senate. What's your reaction to the fact that there's not a deal yet with the government deadline looming? Do you have any plans to speak to Speaker Johnson between now and when the House gets back? And do you think that 2 weeks is enough time to negotiate the reforms that you're looking for? I know that there's a lot there, so you can.
We have to deal with the issue of reining ICE and the Department of Homeland Security in with the fierce urgency of now. And a 2-week window will evaluate whether that's sufficient time, but there's urgency to dealing with this issue. Because ICE, as we've seen, is out of control, and the American people know it. The American people know that the Trump administration on all of the things has gone too far. And that taxpayer dollars should not be used to brutalize the American people, and in some instances, kill them. So this is something that has to be addressed. And, you know, Democrats in the Senate, led by Chuck Schumer, supported by the House, made a clear demand. Separate out the 5 bills that clearly have bipartisan support. And then separately, we can deal with making sure that ICE is brought under control in a variety of different ways, including our demand, which we will not walk away from, which is that judicial warrants should be required before ICE can storm homes and rip people out of their cars. Judicial warrants.
Oh, you're muted, Monique.
Oh, hey, Reese Colbert. Clay.
Hey, girl.
I'm thankful Leader Jeffries called a thing and said that this administration has repeatedly intimidated free and fair press.
Yes.
And so for those of you who are just joining us, before I get Clay's thoughts on this or a continuation of his thoughts, you guys know, unless you're under a rock, our host, I'm sitting in, honored to be sitting in as guest host because Don Lemon right now is in Los Angeles being detained, arrested in federal detention for his work as a journalist.
Okay.
Georgia Fort is arrested in Minneapolis, Minnesota for her work as a journalist. And we have been discussing this administration and its insistence upon this arrest. We've seen statements from Pam Bondi about this arrest and these arrests. And I also want to say before I go back to Clay, please like, please subscribe, please do all the things that Don would have asked you to do 4 times already if he was here. We want to support independent media and we want the algorithm to continue to be our friend. Let people know you're on here. Let people know that even though Don is unjustifiably, lawlessly arrested right now, that we are still honoring his commitment to independent journalism by covering the story and bringing you the facts and the news. Clay.
So I was saying this in 2024. This is part of the reason why it was important to show up to vote. This was always the game. This was always the end game. This was in Project 2025. They're attacking journalists, and as I was saying before, they're using a part of the KKK Act from 1871 to attack a journalist, a Black journalist. And I know this might be small, but I still think it's important to say. This is why I was so outraged when Nicki Minaj said, "Lock Don Lemon up." For her to say that about a Black journalist, a Black man, I thought it was very dangerous. This is where we are. And thank God for independent media. And, you know, Reese was saying this a couple weeks ago, that every single media outlet in the country should have been all over the original threat against Don Lemon. And now I see them talking. Now I see them babbling. Now it's nonstop on the MS Now and all that good stuff. Now they're saying something. But we should all know they're coming for you as well.
Yeah.
And I really, y'all got to understand, like I said before, Speaker Jeffrey spoke, they're doing their 19th century research. Our ancestors are rolling in their graves that they're using a KKK act against Don Lemon, against a Black journalist, in the name of Ida B. Wells, in the name of so many Black journalists. That's what they're doing. We know he didn't do anything wrong, but that doesn't matter to them. They are using civil rights to criminalize a Black journalist. It's very, very clear. So listen, right now, the platform, the mountain that Don Lemon has built in this moment, it's important for us to collectively show up for him. Yeah. Don't downplay the importance of social media, reaching out, posting about it. We've been on this for a long time, and we all know, everyone here, this could easily be one of us if we report the truth. They don't want dissenters. They want you to bow down. They want you to think no matter what you do, no matter how you resist, you will always fail, you will always lose. We can't absorb that. So right. I'm outraged, and my prayers are with Don.
You know what, Reese? I'm gonna say something. I think it was Charles who was saying last week. One of the reasons we're seeing this attack on independent media and people who are covering the stories on the ground the way Don does, the way Georgia does, is because they cannot be controlled. There's over 25,000 people on here right now, and our host extraordinaire is not even with us. He's in lockup. But there is no control. They have put their foot on the neck of mainstream media and sued and won. And we've watched the way mainstream media journalists have cowered and been afraid and backtracked and refused to report things. And I'm not even talking about any particular journalist. I'm talking about the structure, the machine of it. And so, Reese, that's why things like what Don is doing, what Georgia does, and frankly, what you and Clay do is so important.
Okay, so I asked Nikki if I could cuss. She didn't tell me no. So let me just unload a little bit. First of all, I have to say that I want everybody to pay attention to the bitch assness of the mainstream media and the propaganda. And I say that it's propaganda that they're spreading because when you have headlines like what People Magazine did that characterize Don Lemon as attending the protests as opposed to reporting from the protests, that is state propaganda because he was not an attendee. And mind you, it's not illegal to fucking protest. That's what the January 6ers did. I thought, wasn't that a big ass protest, a kumbaya? Very fine citizens. So it's not illegal to protest. So even if he was protesting, that wouldn't be a problem, but he was reporting. Georgia Fort was reporting. So every mainstream media outlet that reports this as they were attending is spreading Trump Pam Bondi propaganda. They're doing a disservice to their listeners, to their readers. And that's exactly why people have lost faith in the mainstream media and why they have turned to the Don Lemon Show and others, including us.
This is one of the biggest ideas we've ever had to pull off.
I tweeted out that I've been sitting on this idea for a commercial, and Mark, the founder of Salesforce, responded.
There is a problem with that. There is a complete ass backwardsness to that. Number 3, fuck the people on the grand jury that gave these bullshit ass charges. A judge had enough sense to say, oh, you know what? Nah, I'm not going to put my stamp on it. But whoever these people are that went in that room and put forth these indictments, fuck them. They are no better than the people who attended lynchings, who sat up there and yelled down Ruby Bridges and others. That's who those people are. So anybody, and I'm going to call out some white liberals too. Any white liberal, oh, I don't know how I saw somebody there, I was wondering how we had the Jim Crow. Look to the people in the grand jury. It's still here. Jim Crow is still here. It's called Trump Crow now.
Yep.
And then the last thing I'll say is, this is not just an attack on journalism. It's an attack on the humanity of Black people. It's an attack on the idea that there can be legitimacy to what Black people do. And so they are putting these folks forth. And mind you, a majority of the people who have been arrested in this protest, which again is not illegal, have been Black. There's one white guy, but they've been Black. And this administration has been strategic since the very beginning of this administration and saying, okay, if we attack Black people, then there will be a little bit less galvanization around the fact that we are violating the citizenship of these people, that we are violating the Constitution, because who gives a damn about LaMonica McIver, a congresswoman, who's still facing charges? And who gives a damn about Black activists? And who gives a damn about Black journalists? That those people are not legitimate. You're not legitimate even as a congresswoman who has a constitutionally vested authority. You're not legitimate as a journalist because you're Black. So I think that part needs to be highlighted, but I'm beyond furious at this because it is layered on so many levels, and it is especially disgusting, as Clay talked about, how they're using the KKK Act, and they're using things like, for instance, with what they tried to do with the abortion, trying to protect people entering abortion clinics. They are turning these things on its head to hold Black people in particular as political prisoners, because that's what this is. So
Right,
I'm outraged.
The way that they use it is also, it's not just that they misuse it for certain purposes, they refuse to use it for others. So where they refuse to prosecute those who are interrupting or impeding access to abortion clinics, or where they refuse to care if it's a Black church and somebody goes in there the way that people barged into Pastor Jamal Bryant's church, they are cherry picking. They are doing what in the law we consider to be inequitable. And I want to, I have a statement from Reverend Al Sharpton that I want to read some of, but before we do that, I believe we have a video from Emmy award-winning journalist Georgia Fort, who is on the ground in Minnesota, something she reported right before she was arrested.
Do you want to wear my black shoes?
You guys, I wanted to alert the public that agents are at my door right now. They're saying that they were able to go before a grand jury sometime, I guess, in the last 24 hours, and that they have a warrant for my arrest. I've talked to my attorney, and I'm being advised to go with them, I guess, down to Whipple. And my children are here. They're impacted by this. This is all stemming from the fact that I filmed a protest as a member of the media. We are supposed to have our constitutional right of the freedom to film, to be a member of the press. I don't feel like I have my First Amendment right as a member of the press, because now federal agents are at my door arresting me for filming the church protest a few weeks ago. Again, I don't have a long time here, you guys, but I wanted you to know, for me, agents are at my door right now. My attorney has spoken with them. I did send a relative outside to talk to them. They're showing some type of documentation, apparently, that they got an indictment from a grand jury. I knew that I was on a defendant's list. I did not publish it because it was under seal. And so we've done everything that we can to try and abide by, the advice of our attorneys. But right now, you guys, I wanted you to know I'm going to have to hop off here and surrender to agents as a member of the press. I filmed the church protest a few weeks ago, and now I'm being arrested for that. It's hard to understand how we have a constitution, constitutional rights, when you can just be arrested for being a member of the press. We've seen all these violations. All right, you guys, I gotta go. They're knocking.
Yep, she's coming right now.
Give me 1 second. All right, guys.
You want
Monique,
That's despicable.
it is, and it should alarm every single American. I mean, look, folks in here have already said it, but it is worth repeating that a federal magistrate judge declined to authorize charges, said that there was insufficient evidence, said that there was lack of probable cause. So the fact that authorities moved anyway against Don and Georgia should really be alarming to anybody who believes in judicial oversight and constitutional limits. As Georgia said, I mean, just watching that, it's alarming because I mean, she and Don weren't just doing their jobs. Like, journalists have a fundamental responsibility to observe and to document and to inform the public of events as they are unfolding. That is what they are doing. They don't require permission to do that, right? I mean, attempts by government officials to single out and scrutinize members of the press for legal news gathering and for reporting should concern anyone in this country who cares about democracy and a free press. The treatment of journalists, the conditions under which they are expected to work, this is not what is supposed to come with the job, people. And we just reject the notion that journalists can be threatened into silence just for doing their jobs. Press freedom should never be conditional, and that's what we're seeing here today.
I just want to...
Charles, 1 second. I wanted to say, and actually you talked about it last week, they operate in the dark, Aaron. And them coming up with all of those cars in a residential neighborhood to Georgia Fort's home where she has children there when they know she's represented by counsel.
Yeah.
Them showing up in LA in the middle of the night to arrest Don when they know he's represented by counsel that represents several others with whom they have active cases and investigations. That's intentional and unnecessary. Even people, heinous criminals, are allowed to self-report with their lawyers. They can't even pretend that these were people who were going to run. These are people who are actively engaging with the system and alerting them that they had representation. And they chose this, as Charles has been saying, maximum humiliation, maximum intimidation. I had Georgia on my show 2 days ago. And one of the things she said is that there was a protest downtown and that there were independent, and one of the agents turned his rifle, turned his weapon on a journalist. And the journalist, I think it was Nick, I can't remember his last name, had to say, "I'm independent media, I'm a journalist," and put his hands up. That is where we are right now. And I think we have actually, I wanted to see if we could bring up the statement by Pam Bondi.
Monica,
go ahead, Charles.
As we're pulling that up, I have a really important point. There's a reason why. Well, first of all, I want to say, for anyone who's watching this, do not at all mistake this. And Aaron sort of made this point just a second ago. This is not a partisan conversation. This is not an ideological conversation, because to connect the dots for everyone who's sitting, between everyone who's sitting here, what Monique understands and what most of us who are here understand is the value of precedent. And if you care about precedent and you understand the power of precedent, and even if you are not someone who is a Don Lemon fan or you don't believe in liberal media, the precedent that is being created here is such that if it is allowed to stand upon the changing of the guard at some point, they can do that with media that they disagree with, and it may be media that you support. So to Aaron's point, this is not an ideological conversation from the standpoint of left versus right or conservative versus liberal. This is a conversation that is rooted in the idea of democratic principles and the freedom of the press. Now,
And might we add, Charles, not between independent media or legacy media.
That's correct. There's another, excuse me, Aaron, just 1 second. There's another very, very important point, and I appreciate you pointing it out. There's a reason why Don Lemon gets arrested, stay with me, and Jimmy Kimmel gets suspended. And where I'm going with this is, it's easier to pass this off. It's easier to get people not to care when the people who they do it to look like everyone on this panel, and the people who are fighting for the people they do it to look like everyone on this panel. There is a difference. There's a different degree of concern and engagement when we are the ones who are on the front line and it appears as though we are only fighting for ourselves. And I say this for everyone who may be in the audience and maybe in the comments who don't look like us, because in this moment, it will be easy to sort of cast out Don and Georgia as if no one but us cares. And that makes it easier for them to push this and try to establish precedent that can be used against everyone. Please keep that in mind.
Reese?
No, that they've been strategic in how they have targeted who they've targeted. And they do think that, oh well, who cares? Who cares about their black asses? They just gonna be some blacks who people are gonna think that that's a black problem. And they also recognize the bloodlust of their base. They love this kind of stuff. They're in the comments right now. They're probably first time Don Lemon show viewers gloating over the dehumanizing, unconstitutional, unlawful arrest of this regime and Donald Trump's henchman, Pam Bondi. So they're firing on all cylinders right now. And they're trying to pivot the conversation away from the 2 white citizens that they killed and make it seem like, oh, we got to get these rabble-rousing blacks off the street because they're a threat to our Christianity. They're trying to they've also chosen a church to be that kind of rallying cry, even though, as you pointed out, Pastor Jamal Bryant's church was interrupted, and that wasn't a problem. So there's, I wish that we didn't have to get all racial on you, okay? But they're very, very strategic in how they do that. And I challenge, the same way that, Charles, you're challenging, I challenge people to recognize that just because we're the targets, it doesn't mean that we're the end game. The end game is an entire system that allows them to do not just kill at will, not just go into your homes with no warrants, not all those things. That's part of it. It's to have complete control over anybody at any time and be able to arrest. And then we throw this up as a pretext and everybody just goes on about their business. That's really what the end game is. But if they could go through us and desensitize people and normalize people, it makes it that much easier and that much quicker to get to that end game. And that's why you should care.
So I want to just welcome, I know there are a lot of people joining, maybe you're joining for the first time. So please like and please subscribe and please understand that I am obviously not Don Lemon. I'm not even trying to be Don Lemon. I am guest hosting as a friend of the show, someone who has a segment on the channel, and as a supporter of independent media. We have with us Clay Cane, we have Aaron Haynes, who's president of the National Association of Black Journalists, we have Charles Coleman, ASQ, we have Reese Colbert. And the reason why we're here, if you guys can put Mayor Karen Bass's statement back on the screen, I want to read it in its entirety. Just by way of reset, we're here because Don was arrested in the middle of the night by federal agents for doing his job. But Mayor Karen Bass, LA, where the arrest took place, says the following: Don Lemon, an internationally known and renowned journalist and friend, was arrested last night by federal agents and is now in custody in Los Angeles, simply for doing his job and following a protest into a church in Minneapolis while reporting the story. Emmy-winning news producer and Minnesota-based journalist Georgia Fort, another widely respected Black journalist who was also arrested by federal agents in Minnesota for reporting on the same protest. The arrest of journalists for going into a church in the course of reporting is shocking enough. But what's even more alarming is that it's no secret that Don Lemon is a Trump critic. Let me be very clear. President Trump is not de-escalating anything after the fatal shootings of U.S. citizens by federal agents. In fact, the arrest of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort demonstrates quite the opposite. He is escalating. First, Trump's agents shoot and kill people exercising their First Amendment rights, and now we're arresting journalists going into a church. It's an egregious assault on our constitutionally protected First Amendment rights. I have reached out to the U.S. Attorney to check on Don Lemon's status. I think right where Mayor Bass puts it is where it is, because none of this is happening in a vacuum. Yes, journalists were arrested, and that is egregious. They were arrested for going into a church for reporting a story, and that is hideous. But what story were they reporting? Why were they actually there? They were there because Minnesota has been invaded by the federal government, has been occupied by ICE agents who function like thugs and goons, who have killed in broad daylight 2 American citizens who were exercising their right to freedom of speech and to protest. And they claim that they are there in order to get the worst of the worst, to get those who are criminals and committed heinous act. But that is not what any of the evidence or data shows about who's actually being arrested. We have seen crime after crime after crime being committed by our federal government. It is state-sanctioned violence.
So there you have it. I joined in on the Don Lemon stream. We have Monique Presley there, and Reese Colbert, and Aaron Haynes, and some 2 other guys. I don't really know their names that well. But Don Lemon has been arrested. So has Georgia Fort. And they used a law that was put in place because of the Klan. And they use it on these Black people. Y'all think about that. So, you know, the prosecutor can indict and have a ham sandwich. So, you know, more than likely it's probably going to get thrown out. But like they said, it's about embarrassment. You know, it's red meat for the right and all that. You know, so you have to spend out more money for an attorney, you know, just to kind of make your life miserable. But that's what we're working with here in 47. This is what folks wanted, I guess. This is exactly what they wanted. They wanted to be able to put people in their place. So, you know, all this stuff right here is just what I would say they're testing. How far are they gonna let it go? You know, so I thought I'd come and let you know what was going on here. So we would get the information out to you. So Don Lemon and Georgia Fort both have been indicted, you know, by a grand jury. That's the only way they can get it, because no judge would take it. And these judges are not like liberal judges. They were conservative judges too. They wouldn't take it because they didn't see any merit in this. So they try to find ways to get their dirty work done. It's a shame. It really is. But, you know, they voted for this bullshit. And we have to live in it. And, you know, you have to really kind of, you know, you have to watch it. This is different than any other administration we ever had. I remember his first term. Oh, that worked my nerves so bad. So, but yeah, So you guys have a great day. Enjoy your Friday, and I'll talk to you later on tonight. Goodbye.